Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to use an app to build and solve equations that have the same variable on each side of the equation. And you're going to need two things. In a minute, don't go to it yet, but in a minute you are going to use the link that's provided in the lesson to open up this particular app. Now when you open it up, which is the reason I don't want you to go to it yet, your equation is probably going to be different because this app randomly generates equations. So I just want you to stick with me for the moment to see how to use the app. However, you are going to need a recording sheet. Go ahead and get that out if you haven't already. And you need to write down the first equation, which we're going to solve together, again, using the app. So all you need for the moment, again, is just the sheet of paper with this equation written. And then in a moment, you're going to go to the app that I'm using after seeing the example that I'm providing. So the first thing I need to remind you about is the fact that equations are really just big balance beams, right? They are, the equal sign is in the middle. And then typically what we do is that everything that is on the left-hand side of the equal sign is going to go here on the left side of the balance beam. Everything that's on the right-hand side is going to go right there on the right side of the balance beam. And I'm going to begin by building that equation. And I'm going to start by making a mistake. So in case you're watching this without the video for some reason, I am making a mistake, okay? Everything that I ever write that's in red is going to be a mistake. So I'm showing you the wrong thing to do in order to kind of help you to do the right thing when you're building it for real. So a lot of people look at the equation and they see, oh, well, there's a 4 sitting next to an x. So it makes sense that I'm probably going to grab 4 of these little ones, and then I'm going to grab an x because that would be 4x, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, keep in mind I'm doing it wrong, but it's important to understand why. So I'm going to put my 4s here. This is a very common mistake that people make. And then I'm going to drag an x. And then you might say, oh, well, I've got a 1 right there. So I guess that means I need to drag another 1. Okay. Then on the right side of my equal sign, I've got a 2, and then I've got an x. So that must mean that I'm going to drag 2 of these little ones and an x. And then I also notice that I have plus 7. So I'm going to add 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I know that I'm not correct just by looking at it because, again, in order for this to be a balanced equation to be correct, this should be balanced out, and it's not, right? So that's one reason that I kind of know I did something wrong. Another way that you can know you did something wrong is the fact that the app, if I click continue, the app is going to say, hey, the two sides don't match. So again, I know I've done something wrong. So I'm going to hit clear, and it's going to get rid of it, and I'm going to go back to the drawing board. So now that I'm done making my mistake, now I'm going to do it correctly. So that 4x actually represents the fact that I'm going to drag literally 4 x's, 1, 2, 3, and 4, over to that side. And then I'm just going to grab 1 of those. So I'm going to drag 1. And then you guessed it, over on the right-hand side, I'm going to do 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So now, first of all, it's balanced, so that gives me a pretty good indication that I probably did it correctly. But then also, I'm going to click continue, and now the computer doesn't yell at me saying, it's not balanced. So I know I can move on to the next step. So now that we've built it correctly, we can start solving. And it's very important to remember what it is exactly that you want the equation to look like when you're finished. So we know that we need an isolated x on one side of the equal sign and we need a number on the other side of the equal sign. It's kind of telling us like how much does x weigh, right? So right now you'll see we don't have just a single isolated x, and even more than that, we've got an x on both sides of the equal sign. So one of them's going to have to go. So now I'm going to walk you through another common mistake that people make when they're solving equations. And what a lot of people are going to be tempted to do is say, well, I know I got to get rid of one of those variables, and there's fewer, 2 is smaller than 4, so I'm going to deal with this one first. Now, that part I agree with, that part's okay. But then what a lot of people do is that they say, okay, well, I'm going to divide by 2, because that 2 times x means multiplication. But here's the problem, right? If you divide by 2, those 2's are going to cancel out, but then you're still left with an x. Like, dividing by 2 didn't do anything to get rid of the x, and you need not just the 2, but you need the x to go away as well. So we are not going to divide anything. Instead, we're going to figure out what is exactly that we could do to get rid of the 2 and the x. So physically, I can literally just put my hands on that balance beam, and I can literally just yank the x right off of there and take it away. And I can do the same thing for both of those x's. So I'm literally in a second going to reach onto that balance beam, and I'm going to take away those 2 x's. Now you guys have learned since you were little babies, right? What is the big kid word for take away? When we take away, that means the same thing as subtraction. So that is actually what we're going to do. We are going to take away, we're going to subtract those 2 x's to get the x's off of the right-hand side of the balance beam. Now, so notice here that it says on the balance beam, it says add right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to subtract. I'm going to click subtraction there. And so now it's saying subtraction. And notice it says from both. Okay, it's telling you from both sides. You guys know, because we've been solving basic equations for a while, you know that when you have something that you're going to take away on one side of the equation, that you also have to do the same thing on the other side of the equation, so otherwise it doesn't stay balanced. So that's why the computer is automatically prompting you to subtract from both sides. And there is a little bit of a flaw. I wish this thing would let you do 2x, subtract from both sides 2x. It doesn't for some reason. It'll only let you take off an x one at a time. So you're going to have to do that one at a time. So subtract from both sides. You're going to say x, and then you're going to click go. So see, one of those x's disappeared. And then I'm going to do subtract x again, go. So now here, and it still stayed balanced, so I know so far I'm doing the right thing. And I'm going to do that exact same step. I'm going to represent that step on the recording paper that I have here. So in writing, the way I would represent subtracting 2x, of course, I'm simply going to do minus 2x on the right-hand side, which is simply going to cancel out those 2 x's. And I still have a 7 left, so I'm going to bring down the 7. Of course, we subtracted 2x from the right-hand side of the equation, so we also need to subtract 2 x's from the left side of the equation. So I'm going to do 4x and take away 2x. It's going to be subtraction. Keep in mind, I'm not going to subtract 2 from the 1 because, first of all, you can't do 1 minus 2x because they're not like terms, right? So I don't even need to go there. So 4x take away 2x leaves me with 2x. That plus 1 is still hanging out there, is equal to 7. And what's cool about this app is it kind of helps me to check my work as I go, because notice where we subtracted from both sides over on the app. Look, that tells me where I am right now. I have 2 x's, I have a 1, and then I have 7 over here on the right-hand side. 2x plus 1 equals 7 is what I have over there. which matches what I have over there. So that's how you can kind of guarantee by using this app that you did the first step correctly, because everything balances out and everything matches. So now you've got yourself just a plain old two-step equation that you've been solving for a minute that you should pretty much know how to do now, right? So we want to isolate that x. So remember, we need to eliminate the 1 that is with the x, and we are going to do that by subtracting from both sides. We are going to subtract a 1. Click go. On my recording sheet, I'm going to record the fact that I just subtracted 1 from both sides by doing minus 1. And of course, that's going to cancel. That is going to leave me with 2 times x. What I do to one side, I of course need to do to the other. So I'm going to subtract 1 from the 7 as well. So I've got 2x is equal to 6. Sorry, my writing's kind of sloppy there for a second. And again, I know I'm on the right track because A, my balance beam is still balanced, and I have 2x right there is shown for my next step, which matches the 2x minus 6 that I have right there. So everything is matching. I know I'm still doing it correctly. And of course, we know that we still need to isolate the x. It's not isolated all the way. The equation has a 2 sitting next to the x, which of course means multiplication. How are we going to cancel out that multiplication? We're going to do that by dividing. So I'm going to click the division button on the app. It says divide both sides by 2. I'm going to click go. Yay! So it gives me a nice little message that says correct. I know I did it right. But of course, I still want to do the last step on my recording sheet as well. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. X is equal to 3. So for each problem, so let's say you're doing this. Okay, so assume that you've just finished this problem. Now to go to the next problem on the activity, you're going to click this button that says create problem. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're going to click this button that says new problem, because we're not creating our own. We're just going to do what the computer gives us. You're going to click new problem. And now the computer has given you a new problem that you are going to follow the exact same procedure that we just did. So I am going to give you a minute to think about how you would build the equation. So take a minute to think about that, what those steps would be. In the meantime, I'm going to write down the problem on my recording sheet. Okay, so hopefully you've had a minute to think about how you would build it. I'm going to go ahead and do it. So in order to represent the 4x on the left-hand side, I'm going to drag 4 x's over. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then to represent the 3, I'm going to drag over 3 units. Over on the right-hand side, I'm going to drag 3 x's, and then I'm going to drag 5, 3, 4, and 5. I'm pretty sure I did it right because it's balanced, but I'm going to click continue just to make sure. It didn't yell at me, so that means I did it right. Now, something important that I want to show you, and that's why I wanted to do 2 examples before I let you go. A lot of people start off by doing something about the variables first, but you can actually deal with the actual numbers first if you want to. So let me show you what I mean by that, because I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time. Instead of dealing with the x's first, I'm going to actually deal with the numbers, and I'm going to do that by canceling out the 3. That way that'll get the plus 3 off of there so that I just have an x over here, and then the number is just over there. And of course, I'm going to do that. You know how to cancel out a plus 3. We are going to do that by doing a minus 3. So I'm going to click the subtraction button. I'm going to subtract from both sides. I'm going to type a 3 in there. I'm going to click go. I'm going to go back to my recording sheet. and I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides of my equation. Maybe. There we go. It's being a little slow here. So over here, it's going to cancel. I'm going to bring down that 4x. Maybe. And then that's equal to 3x. And then 5 minus 3 is plus 2. So I didn't do it the same way that I did it the last time. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. So let's look and double check. And again, that's what's great about the app, right? Because I see the app tells me I should have 4x is equal to 3x plus 2. 4x is equal to 3x plus 2 here. So I know I'm doing it correctly so far. So now remember what your goal is. Your goal is that you want to get the variable on one side and the number on the other side. So it kind of makes sense now to get rid of that variable so that way you have an x on one side and a number on the other side. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. And how do I get rid of a 3x? I do that by taking away the 3x's. And of course, taking away means subtract. So I am going to click subtract from both sides. And again, I wish I could just type in a 3x, but for some reason this won't let me do that. So I got to do take away an x, go, take away another x, go, take away another x, and then go. Okay, so I subtracted 3 x's. I'm going to go over to my recording sheet. I subtracted 3 x's, which means I need to subtract 3 x's from the other side. So that one's going to cancel. That's going to leave me with a 2 that I need to bring down, equals, and then 4x take away 3x is 1x, which is the same thing as just a regular old x. So I can actually just get rid of that. So now I've got my isolated variable. X is equal to 2, and I can tell I did it right. X is equal to 2, X is equal to 2, X is equal to 2. Everything matches, so I know I solved it correctly. So your job for this task is to do exactly what I just did, and you're going to do it with 10 different problems. So you are now going to go to your app. You're going to click New Problem. It's going to give you a new problem, and you are going to build the equation, solve the equation, and document your steps exactly the same way that I just did.